Doom Patrol Season 2 is just around that corner, so let's recap Season 1. What's up, YouTubers of the world? MegaGeekMixer here to give you guys a recap video on Season 1 of Doom Patrol. But before I do that, I want to give a happy Father's Day out to all the fathers and soon-to-be fathers out there. And I hope y'all have a very happy Father's Day out there. And now that I put that out of the way, we must go ahead and get into this, because this is going to be the toughest recap I've ever done, because it's Doom Patrol. That show is just unpredictable, so weird. It's almost like everything in that show is full of details you just need to let people know about. So bear with me as I do my best here, because this is going to be the toughest one I've ever done yet. Now let's get into it. It starts with us meeting Eric Morgan, who gets experimented on by 3 scientists, one of them being Niles Calders, and becomes Mr. Nobody. Then we are introduced to Cliff Steele, who is a race car driver and is married and has a wife and a kid named Clara, but is a dysfunctional family with both the husband and the wife having secret affairs. Eventually, though, he tries to make things better, but unfortunately, they end up all in a car accident, and Cliff wakes up meeting Larry, Rita, and Niles, and also learning he is now inside a robot's body. As he adjusts to it, we learn of Larry and his past, being a test pilot, married with 2 kids, and secretly gay and in a secret relationship with a guy named John, and also having family commitment issues until an accident from a plane crash fuses him with Negative Man and causes the radiation being fused with him to break his family and his boyfriend's relationship with him. And Rita, who was a motion picture actress back in the 50s, had gotten into an accident in the water and then came out as a blob. She tried to go back into acting but couldn't do it, and met Niles, who introduced her to Minto, who helped her better control her powers. They had a brief love affair until he broke up with her after realizing she did something to someone. And then there's Crazy Jane, who Cliff later on met after finally learning about him being the only one to survive the accident, so he was told. And Crazy Jane's real name is Kay Olivia, who had an abusive father and has 64 multiple personalities with different powers, and they live in a place called the Underground inside of her head, but was once rescued by Niles from the mental hospital. After some time, the chief leaves them and decides to go out of town, while everyone else decides to go into town, unintentionally killing a mouse's mother along the way. During their time in the town, Jane tells Cliff of his daughter still being alive, and Rita accidentally causes chaos in the town by becoming her blob self. Luckily, though, they're able to stop her and take her back to the house, where Chief warns them that now that they've let themselves be known where he is, his enemies are coming. Cliff, on the other hand, wishes to stay and help, and everyone else later on returns to help him out. This is when Nobody kidnaps the chief by sucking him into a hole. Jane goes into the hole with him, and the entire town is destroyed. Cliff decides to stay because he feels that the donkey, which was there during the chaos, is the key to getting the town back. It is during that time we are met by Victor Stone, who was turned into cyborg due to an accident that supposedly killed him and his mother, and he survived and has history with Niles. He learns of what happened to the town and goes there. There he meets Robot Man, who informs him of everything that happened, and Jane gets spat out from the donkeys. During that time, Robot Man and Cyborg try to get info from her, but she's not able to give it to him. Robot Man eventually learns of Jane and the Underground through the files of Chief's old files of Jane, and this eventually leads into Crazy Jane going into a brief battle with Cyborg and Cliff. But luckily they subdue her, and Cliff is able to get her back to being Jane. But that was going on during when the donkey had actually sucked in Larry and Rita and Cyborg. Once inside the donkey, Mr. Nobody tries to attack them psychologically. It works on Rita and Larry, but not Cyborg. But before things could get worse, Negative Man, the spirit, is able to save them and get them out of the donkey. After which, Silas comes to the manor and tries to bring his son back, but he refuses as he wants to find Niles. They get a clue that leads them to Paraguay. Unfortunately, though, because of all their personal issues, they don't function well as a team, as they get to the point where Jane only takes Larry and Robot Man to Paraguay. There, they meet a guy who becomes Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man at the end of their journey, who we find robbing stores, then getting arrested, and then has a failed assassination attempt on him throughout the show. And as for Rita and Cyborg, they're left behind to work out their issues together. And in the meantime, Jane, Cliff, and Larry go to a place called Fuktopia to learn of how Mr. Nobody became Mr. Nobody. And then they each start to talk with some people, which causes Larry to go into a machine to confront Negative Man, who makes him confront his demons and accept his responsibilities. While Jane meets Von Voosh, another scientist to help create Nobody, who has minions of his attack her and Cliff, which causes Smith to go on a bit of a manslaughter, and Jane to kill Von Voosh. Eventually, though, Cyborg and Rita show up after everything is done, and since they got no clues, they head back home. That's when they meet an Englishman magician known as Kipling, who came to warn Niles about the culture of the unwritten book, that is to summon the D-Creator. The cult of the unwritten book, being a boy named Elliot, meant to destroy the world, is rescued by the Doom Patrol from his mother, and Robot Man and Jane go to a place called Nornheim, which is where they could close the gate and prevent the D-Creator from happening. Unfortunately, they are captured by the High Priest of Nornheim, Elliot's parents, and Elliot, not wanting the world to come to an end because of him, tries to kill himself, but Rita prevents that from happening. And when assassins come and try to kill Elliot, Kipling tries to take a last-ditch effort in killing Elliot himself. However, Rita doesn't allow that to happen, and eventually Elliot brings forth the D-Creator, and as it starts to destroy the world, Nobody and Niles decide to work together and form a plan to stop the D-Creator by going into the past and getting the help of one of Jane's personas known as Dr. Harrison to create a cult in the past known as the Recreator. There, she chooses a woman named Marilyn to choose her to remind her of her mission for when the time comes. That is when in the present that Marilyn finds Jane and Robot Man in Nurnheim and reminds her of it so she can ring the bell of the church there and summon the D-Creator, who is able to prevent it, but only through the help of Niles, who is able to come back for a while and let everyone in the present know of the D-Creator that's being created in the past to come here in the present, which they find in the form of the dog. And it's during this time Niles and Larry have a talk where Niles informs Larry that the negative spirit in him are having issues because Larry continues to torture himself, which tortures the negative spirit. And after all this is done, though, Mr. Nobody recaptures Niles, but Cyborg, trying to stop Mr. Nobody, gets his arm exploded. But with a reset button that Cliff presses, his arm is rebuilt with cybernetics. And in the meantime, Mr. Nobody lets Jane know that she needs to find the first Doom Patrol. While researching who the Doom Patrol are, learning that they were an active group back in the 50s, Rita informs Jane about her previous relationship with Mento. Knowing this, Jane brings Rita and Larry to where the Doom Patrol are now and learn that they are now seemingly teaching a new generation of metahumans, and also meet Josh. While there, Rita reunites with Mento, and each of them learn from someone at the headquarters of the Doom Patrol that they fought Mr. Nobody and seemingly won. But when they are informed that Mr. Nobody is still around, that's when they continue to get attacked by their fears through Mento, who is actually old and not as young as he seems. Negative Man ends up saving every one of them by taking Mento's helmet off, and they are revealed to what really happened to the Doom Patrol, and that Mr. Nobody defeated them by using their fears against them. Rita decides to use this chance to help Mento by opening up to him about how she's trying to find a new identity. This helps Mento calm down, and everything seems to all be settled down. But before they leave, Jane is informed by Josh that Niles abandoned the Doom Patrol after their fight with Mr. Nobody. While all that was going on, though, Cliff learns of learns of his daughter having an online web page and wishes to become friends with her, but he asks his cyborg to do it for him, which at first he declines to do, and in the meantime Cyborg's father comes to help his son reboot, but knowing that he'll have to go into sleep mode, Cyborg declines and asks Cliff for help, who declines him. But while he is in sleep mode and Cliff tells Silas about what happened to make Cyborg go into reset mode, Silas doesn't feel appreciative about what his son did, which causes Cliff to make Silas realize that he needs to make sure not to make mistakes that he will regret. This allows Silas to let his son continue to search for the chief with the entire group, and in the meantime Cyborg changes his mind and allows Cliff to become friends with his daughter through a web page called Facehole. It is there he also learns that Bum, who had the affair with his wife, is now Clara's father, which doesn't go too well for him. While trying to find a new identity, Rita is having trouble controlling her powers. In the meantime, Negative Man tries to help Larry deal with his regrets, while Cyborg starts to get back into his social medias that were locked down by his father until he got him back on. In the meantime, Jane, fearing that the chief will abandon her, starts to have mental breakdowns with her different personalities. But Cliff has the worst of it all. From when he accidentally killed the rat's mother, that rat finally makes its move by going inside Cliff's inside robot body and starts to mess with his wiring system, that it causes Cliff to go into a psychotic breakdown mode and attack Cyborg in the mansion, thinking that he's attacking Bum and seeing his daughter and everything. But until he finally comes to his senses, that he forces therapy on everybody, while each and every one of them opens up about their issues, such as Cyborg's guilt with killing his mother and stuff, Larry's self-loathingness, and Rita not knowing who she is without being Rita. Jane breaks it down more when she reveals a painting of Cyborg killing everybody. This has caused the therapy session to go out of hand, and Cliff and Jane have a fallout that Jane decides to run away. Cliff tries to go after her, but the haywiring gets out of control until the rat is finally able to get out of him, and feeling he has exhausted his revenge, leaves. With Jane's breakdown, she goes deep into the underground, which allows a love-struck person named Karen, who has the power of love spells and make people fall in love with them, come out. She tries to get married to an old boyfriend of hers named Douglas, putting both a love spell on Rita, Douglas, and his family. But since Cliff can't be hypnotized by it because he's in a robot body, he is able to stop her from getting married and able to get Hammerhead to stop Karen from going through with it, but it leads into a big fight over controlling her that Jane goes into a coma. And while all that is going on, we are introduced to a street known as Danny the Street, which is a genderqueer living being that's a safe community for the LGBTQ community, and an agent who was there to try to capture him, but had a change of heart and decided to inform Danny of his partner Darren Jones standing on standby to capture him. This allows him to run away and causes him to ask Niles for help. But instead, Vic and Larry get the message and go to Danny the Street. It is there they are informed by the agent known as Morin Wilson that Danny the Street of who he is and how he feeds off the positivity of the Dannysons, the sit-ins of Danny Street. But with him being on the hunt by the Bureau of Normalcy, which Larry has ties to because he was once one of their assets, and the Bureau of Normalcy being a government organization that persecutes people who are not normal and captures people with powers to turn them into weapons. Danny, having gotten tired of running away when the Bureau of Normalcy finally catches up to him, decides to take a stand and fight against them, and they eventually are able to scare the Bureau off, and Danny's happiness is able to come back thanks to the Denizens and Larry. And in the meantime, Danny the Street gives Victor a clue to finding Mr. Nobody, which is in the form of a comic book. After saving Danny the street, they go back to the manor where they try to wake up Jane, who is still in a coma, because inside her head, Jane refuses to go back to the surface, even though everyone else in the underground is insistent on her going back, because being the primary personnel needs to set balance and stuff. However, as she's going back, she convinces Driver 8 to stop the train so she doesn't go back. And in the meantime, Negative Man transfers Cliff's soul into Jane's head. There he finds himself becoming a human again and meets Driver 8, who supposedly helps him to find Jane by sending Hammerhead, who in actuality sends him to a brig. While Cliff is left in the brig, Jane runs into Penny's father as she feels lost and wants to find answers. She heads over to the sisters, who tell her to go to the well. Penny tries to warn her against going to the well, but it falls on deaf ears by Jane as she goes on anyway. Knowing this, Penny finds Cliff and has him help her to stop Jane. While they're on the move and looking for Jane, Penny tells Cliff about why no one should go to the well by telling him the fate of a previous primary, Miranda, who went to the well and things didn't go so well for him, as well as letting Cliff know that he gave Jane hope the day they first met. Eventually, they do find Jane, and Cliff tries to plead to her to come back to the surface, but she refuses and continues on. As she makes her way to the well, she stops and meets her younger self and opens up to how feeling so lost about everything through all the abusive father she's been through and everything. And later on, Cliff, still not giving up, meets up with the woman named Black Anus and eventually is able to pass by her because he is able to rip off his human skin and reveal that he's a robot man, as well as embracing that he is who he is now. After finally passing through her, he makes it to Jane before she goes through the well. The well tries to still take Jane by taking the form of her father and tries to kill Cliff. This allows Jane to snap out of it and stand up to abusive father and allow those two to head back to the surface. But while all this was going on, there were three things taking place while Cliff was trying to save her. One, in the fact that Vic and Rita were still looking into that comic book that Danny gave them, and they found a missing picture of someone in there. But eventually their search comes to an end when they find a guy named Ernest Franklin, known as the Beer Hunter, who was hired by the Bureau to find Niles, infiltrated the manor, and took some of Niles' hair to try to locate him. Unfortunately, he fell unconscious, which allowed Vic and Rita to find him and get information on him, knowing that he's on a mission to find Niles, but also hints at some deep secrets Niles has. They decide that since he can find Niles, they decide to have a tracker put on him. But before they can do that, though, he escapes and has a brief fight with Victor and reveals that Victor is being taken over by his AI Grit, who is confirming this by trying to kill the Beard Hunter. But luckily, they are able to stop the AI from doing that, and Cyborg shuts down his system. After doing that, he informs Rhea of how he hasn't told anybody about it because he's afraid that the painting that Jane showed him will come true, and he asks Rita to keep it a secret. But also Rita lets him know that she put the tracer on Beer Hunter just before he left. And Beer Hunter seemingly looks like he found Chief, but instead he found something else, which leads us into learning about the Chief's past. He used to be a member of the Bureau of Normalcy. Back then it was known as the Bureau of Odyssey, and during a time when he was wounded thanks to some animals out in the north, he finds himself being rescued by a native wolf woman, and at first those two are hostile, but as he begins to spend time with her and learn her culture, such as death, tributes of the dead, and eternal life through cave paintings, he decides to stay with her for 3 years, and they eventually fall in love and make love. Eventually, though, he is reunited with a friend of his named Alistair, who has actually been on the hunt for his new wife, but Niles protects her by killing Alistair and deciding to return back to civilization to protect her. However, Mr. Nobody knows about this because he's been eavesdropping on his memories and then decides that he wants to know where Niles' daughter is. But Niall refuses. In the meantime, everyone informs Jane of what all she missed. There she reveals to them about Flex Mentallo being the missing piece in the comic book. But Cliff, knowing that Bum has died and wants to be with his daughter, asks Jane to send him to Florida, which Rita comes along with him. And in the meantime, Jane asks Vic for help and to looking in on Metallo's wife. But unfortunately, Vic is end up captured by the Bureau of Normalcy because Dolores was actually an agent for the Bureau of Normalcy. Unfortunately, though, they didn't capture Jane and asks for Cliff. While he does get to see his daughter, he is informed of how Bum dies from getting killed by a gator, and that gator has a watch that Clara owns that was a watch he once had. He goes out to try to find the gator, but has trouble finding him, has a meltdown before actually finding him and returning the watch to Clara, but refuses to still speak with her, mostly probably out of shame, and asks for Larry. Well, he is busy reconciling with his ex-boyfriend John, who is about to pass away, which the negative spirit was trying to inform him of during the entire time when he was in a dream state. And asks for Vic. Before being captured, he learns from Grid that he's becoming more cyborg than human. And after everybody reunites back at the mansion, Jane informs them of the Bureau taking them, which Larry informs them of who they are. Silas, knowing that something has happened to his son, returns to the manor and learns of what has happened, while Cyborg in the meantime in his cell is actually unbeknownst the next door neighbor of Mentallo. Flex Mentallo was once a former superhero who had the power to flex his muscles that could make him do just about anything. He was married to his wife Dolores, but was captured by the Bureau of Normalcy, and it was around this time that he was the next door neighbor of Larry and Negative Man when they were assets of the Bureau. But he was trying to work together with Negative Man to escape, but when the Bureau showed that they had his wife a prisoner, he refused, he surrendered himself. And in the meantime, Silas and the Doom Patrol, knowing that they can't get Vic out of the ant farm legally, decide to break in by having them pretend they are captured, and Silas seeming like he betrayed them. And during that time, Negative Man is separated from Larry. But what the ant farm doesn't realize is that Rita is the key to rescuing everybody. A little flaw in the plan in the name of Karen, but they come up with an idea to free all the prisoners, which causes a riot in the ant farm. And in the meantime, when Silas is trying to get his son out and try to get Grid back into his system, what he didn't know is that Cyborg seemingly had Grid rebooted to him and was given fake footage of how his father made him into a cyborg and made nanites a part of him, knowing how dangerous they were. But what Cyborg didn't know was that this was all Nobody's influence until he realized it too late that he nearly killed his father. But luckily they're able to teleport Silas Stone to a hospital after escaping from the ant farm and from nearly being captured, but not before getting Flex Mentallo to come with them and learning that he not only has his powers but doesn't remember who he is, which Cliff and Jane then make it their mission to try to get him to remember by giving him a makeover and doing all other things to try to help him remember. But nothing works until Negative Man is able to help Larry remember their history with Flex Mentallo, that Larry remembers that the best way to get his memory back is through his wife, Dolores. And after Flex and Dolores are reunited, they have a brief moment of happy reunion until Dolores dies due to a failsafe that the Bureau put on her in case they ever met again. This in turn, though, does get his powers back, but in a grieving way. And in the meantime, Jane sending Silas and Victor to the hospital with Rita in tow. Cyborg refuses to look for Nobody after what Nobody made him do to his father. But Rita is able to help him change his mind by installing Grid after first getting help from a senior citizen to help her look past her fears and move on. and go back to the others so they can finally find the chief. But little did she know that senior citizen was actually Mr. Nobody, who wants them now to find him. But not before they needed to save Larry, who was dying without the negative spirit. At first, Larry wants Negative Man to be free, but Negative Man chooses to save Larry and stay within him. After everyone is ready to get back on the search with the chief, they eventually track down Beard Hunter to Danny the Street, along with Fletch Mentallo coming along with them, who actually is an old friend of Danny's. There they find the Beard Hunter, who says he never found the chief, but Danny lets them know he knows where the chief is. He is in the white space of comic books, and that Flex is able to help them by getting inside the comic book. Not before the first failed attempt causes a sex orgasm, but after that first one, they're able to get inside the white space, and Mr. Nobody tries to bargain with them to change their past, but they refuse and eventually find their way back to each other and to Mr. Nobody. While that was going on, Cyborg learns from his father that while the accident was true, his mother and him were still alive, but Niles convinced Silas to save Victor instead of her, and that Silas altered Cyborg's memories, which he wasn't happy about and decided to go back to the team. And it looks like he showed up just in time to help them stop Mr. Nobody, and they all looked like they went home, but it was actually just a loop, and Mr. Nobody was still there. He had just disguised himself as Cyborg until the real Cyborg showed up and finally made Niles tell the truth and the fact that he was the one that caused the accidents that gave the Doom Patrol their powers. He did it to learn how to gain immortality so he could outlive his daughter, and with nobody having gotten his revenge and the team now hating Chief, he allows them to leave. 6 months pass. Rita and Larry are living together. Jane is living on the bus, and Cliff keeps a watch over her while Cyborg goes back to Detroit and reconciles with his father. But Jane in the meantime gets a drug from Josh, who also knew about what Niles did, that allows her to go calm her down along with her personnel until the secretary snaps her out of it. In the meantime, Mr. Nobody ends up teaming up with Ezekiel the Roach and Admiral Whiskers as they decide to go after Niles' daughter. Unfortunately, the plan backfires and Niles is betrayed by Ezekiel and Admiral Whiskers because Dorothy grows them larger in size and starts to make them go on a rampage on Danny the Street. But luckily, Danny sends out an SOS to the Doom Patrol to help him out, and the denizens are saved by Flex. When the Doom Patrol reunites and Chief asks for their help, they agree to help, only to save Dorothy and Danny the Street. Once they make it to Danny the Street, they are informed by Mr. Nobody of what happened. Chief and Jane rescue Dorothy, while everyone else gets eaten by the Roach, and Admiral Whiskers eats up Cliff. But the plan is for them to get eaten inside Ezekiel. So to get Cliff out, they have Ezekiel and Admiral Whiskers do a French kiss so Cliff can crawl into the Roach's belly. And in the meantime, Rita, having talked with Mr. Nobody to gain his confidence back so he can start narration, allows all this to happen, while Negative Man opens up a portal that allows them and Danny the Street to escape from Admiral Whiskers with Ezekiel Roach back to normal size, and everyone escaping his body and now small size, but Larry being the only one who's big size. And Act for Nobody, well, he was left behind. And that right there, guys, was Season 1 of Doom Patrol. For all of you who are able to stay throughout the whole time, I appreciate it, and I thank you for your support, because this, once again, like I said, had to be the toughest recap I've ever done, because there was so much to go through here. But I thank you all who support my channel and who are able to stay through the whole thing. And until then, guys, I'm going to leave it all at that, and I hope you're all ready for Season 2 like I am, because I am super excited for it. But until then, guys, that'll be all for today, and if you're enjoying my videos, all you gotta do is click that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to be notified when I make more videos, and until then, MegaGeekMixer signing out. Bye!